right, this is Yoga Talks Podcast. My name is Jay Brown. I would like to welcome you, express some gratitude that you are listening. Thank you. I am coming to you from a bit of a weird moment. Normally, I would have recorded this a couple of days ago, but I'm completely off of my usual routines. It's like Sunday afternoon. My wife and kids are upstairs. They've already interrupted me twice in trying to do this, but I have no other choice. It's going to happen now or never. The reason it's happening now and not a couple days ago is because this week went a little bit south for me. I hurt myself terribly. I was in my basement lifting an EMAC. I don't know if you know what an EMAC is. I'm betting some of you do, but I know a lot of you are younger than me, and maybe you have no idea what an EMAC is. It was the precursor to the Apple iMac computer, and anyone who recalls it will remember that it is a big, heavy-ass TV kind of thing. And I did everything that you're not supposed to do when you pick up a heavy object, and I hurt my back really bad. At first, I didn't think it was that bad. I took like a little time off, like one day off. I was feeling a little better. I'm like, I'm good. And I just sort of jumped back in. And then my body completely revolted and said, no, sir. You have hurt yourself much more than you have allowed time to heal. And it came back with ferocity and put me down. And, you know, on another day, in another circumstance, I'm betting I could have picked up that thing just the same way I did and not hurt myself. But this week, it hurt me. And it's one of those occasions where I feel like my body expresses what's going on with me in perfect metaphor. So right now, my body refuses to carry any weight. Like if I have to hold a bag in my hand or throw a backpack over my shoulder, even just a little, not even heavy, like my back will start hurting. Like I cannot carry any more weight than I already am, which is true in other ways, you know, with everything happening with the center and me buying this house. There's just so much weight and pressure on me on both a mental and physical level right now. I simply cannot carry any more weight than I already am. But fortunately, I was still able, despite this challenge, to start my teacher training yesterday with a fantastic group of people. So that feels really good, and I'm actually feeling a bit better today, which is nice. And also, that document from the city that we were waiting for all week finally did come. And I believe the day that this is posting, if you're listening to this on the Monday that it posts, there's a good chance that right now while you're listening to this, I am signing my name on a dotted line, handing someone a very big fat check, and getting some keys to my first ever home. So we're still not celebrating it as of this moment, but next week, my friends, we are going to have a celebration. Believe you me. Believe you me. But this week, we are talking to Jivana Heyman from Accessible Yoga and the Accessible Yoga Conference. I did not know Jivana. He reached out to me some while back and asked me if I would moderate a panel discussion at the upcoming conference, which is happening May 19th through 21st. And I was very happy to do it. So I've been kind of educating myself and gearing up and learning about the conference. We had Rudra on last week. Hope you enjoyed that. And as I mentioned, I ended up having this conversation with Jivana as well. And I really enjoyed it. It was lovely to get to know him and to hear about how he took difficulty and horror in his life and made it this like gift of yoga for everyone. So Very cool talk. We're going to listen to it today. Let me mention, I didn't mention it last week and I forgot. If you are thinking about going to the conference and you haven't signed up yet, there's going to be a link for you to hit. You can use promo code JBrown to get 10% off. So check it out. It's an amazing conference. You'll hear about it in today's talk. And if afterwards you want to go, you can just drop in, I believe, for some sessions. Click on the link, use promo code JBrown and get 10% off. Before we listen to Jivana, let me mention next week's podcast with Andrew Tanner from the Yoga Alliance. I recorded it live at the Yoga Journal conference, and I have a blog post that came out today alongside this podcast that's about Yoga Journal's decision to discontinue doing conferences for a time. I think it was a very significant occurrence. Yoga Journal conferences were a real institution. They launched many careers in the yoga world, and the fact that they're no longer happening is kind of a big deal. And I made comments about it, and I'd be interested to hear what any of you might think. So you can check out that blog post. It's called Yoga Journal Exit Stage Right. The talk I recorded with Andrew at the conference does touch on the fact that the conferences are being discontinued and just like the future of yoga in general. And honestly, Andrew made some very interesting comments that I've been thinking about since. So it's a really interesting and I think important talk next week. And I want to encourage you to check it out. One more thing about the conference. I mentioned this last week that when I was at the presenters dinner, I kind of had a little run-in with Rodney Yee, and I just thought it was kind of an amazing moment. It was, I think, in all good fun, at least from my side it was, but Andrew Tanner, my buddy, was sort of taking me around and kind of introducing me to some people, and we walked up to Rodney Yee, and he said, I believe his exact words were, Rodney, this is Jay Brown. He's like the Charlie Rose of the yoga world. Now, I would not have chosen Charlie Rose myself. I could think of a couple other people I would have rather been compared to, but that's what Andrew said. And it seemed like Rodney kind of reacted immediately to that. And he was like, oh, well, really? And sort of immediately kind of came at me saying, well, why are you asking me questions? I should be asking you questions. And I said, well, I really don't write questions. I try to just be present and have a conversation with someone as much as I can. I mean, sometimes I do like a little research. I want to know about someone if I don't already. But generally with you, I don't think I need to do a lot of research. I'd just be curious to talk about what happened in your life. And I don't know, you're like, how many people on this podcast, when I ask them, what was your first yoga? They say a Rodney Yee yoga DVD. So I would love to sort of see if I could speak to that guy, whoever he is. You don't know who he is when you watch the DVD, but standing next to him at this presenters dinner, I was getting a pretty, I don't know, it wasn't entirely cold, but it was definitely like competitive and kind of aggressive. And he was sort of questioning whether or not I was legit, like whether or not, I could hold my own in a real conversation about yoga. And, at some point, I think I kind of, how should I say, I got defensive. I very rarely do I kind of lose it a little bit, but there was a moment where he like pushed a button in me, and I like came at him strong. I was like, yo, listen. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I threw out a jolt at him, and everybody around felt it. And Michael Lee from Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy was standing next to me, and he's been on the podcast, and he's become a really a dear friend, I would say. And I hope it's okay for me to say, I think it's okay, but he was next to me, and he saw that Rodney got under my skin, and he sort of said he got you, and he he acted as a little bit of an alarm for me. It was really helpful. Michael, if you're listening, I appreciated that moment. And I did like pull back and I was like, oh, okay, wait a second. I kind of lost my shit there for a second with Rodney Yee. Ultimately, in the end, it did like kind of dissipate, and he kind of came off of it and he said, oh, well, you seem like a pretty good guy. Maybe I would come on your podcast. And he was like kind of talking about a lot of different things in the conversation. But it was kind of a weird moment. And when I got home, you know, I did like a little searching. I couldn't help myself. And I discovered that one of his new projects is doing like these interviews, like kind of like Charlie Rose interviews. So I think that Andrew's comment just triggered it. Like he was saying, no, I'm the Charlie Rose of the yoga world. Who are you? Or something like that. I don't know. But I would love to talk to Rodney Yee. And if on the off chance he was just playing me and he listens to the podcast, if you're listening, Rodney, or somebody points you to it and you're listening, man, come on the podcast. Let's have a talk, man. Let's talk it out. That would be awesome. So who knows? All in good fun, I think. I don't think it was any like bad feeling in the end, but it was kind of a little bit of a moment. And the next day, I recorded this talk with Andrew that you'll hear next week. Let me also mention some dates. I want to give a shout out to my friends in West Hartford, Connecticut. I did a workshop there just a couple weeks ago, and a bunch of podcast listeners showed up, and that was really cool. So shout out to my friends in Connecticut, podcast listeners who came to West Hartford, Connecticut. It was a really good time. Thank you. My next gig is in Montana, June 17th through 24th. This is the big retreat gig at the Feathered Pipe Ranch in Montana. As I've mentioned before, I have never, ever done a retreat in my life. In my, 20 years of teaching at this point? I've never done a retreat, but I'm doing one in June because it's the Feathered Pipe Ranch. And it's kind of a historic place that so many people that I admire have gone to as like a annual ritual. And frankly, it's kind of terrible timing for me. Like I'm going to be moving and it's just, it's bad time. And I don't even think I'm going to make any money really off it. I don't know. It doesn't really seem like it, but I'm going anyways because something in me says you got to go to this place. I don't know why. I can't explain it. But I feel like I'm supposed to go to this place in Montana, the Feathered Pipe Ranch, for this retreat next month. So I'm going. I'm going to book my ticket. And if you want to come, I have a feeling, I don't know. It's a thing. So June 17th through 24th, Feathered Pipe Ranch in Montana. If you can come, check it out. I am also going to be in Helsinki, Finland, August 23rd through the 30th. If you are in that part of the world, you can find out about those events. You can read that blog post I was mentioning, listen to the archives of this podcast, and find my online yoga videos at jbrownyoga.com. Also, maybe you show a little love to the podcast. Go to iTunes, hit us up with a review and some stars, or go to a blog or podcast page and make a donation. Your support is really welcomed and appreciated. All right, then. I think that's enough, don't you? Let's get to this talk today with Jivana Heyman.
I have dogs. Hopefully they won't bark.
I see. That's okay. I don't mind a little dog barking in the background. We're all householder yogis around here, right? Oh, I guess not, though. Not always.
Well, I am.
Yeah, me too. Well, we could talk about that because you have, like, I never lived in ashrams before.
Yeah.
But
I actually haven't lived really in them, but I help manage them from outside. I was always the, like the person who came in and managed from my house.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, first of all, let me just ask, your name is pronounced Jivana?
Yes, you
Is
said
that
it right.
Okay, good. Because
Yeah. Oh.
I wasn't sure, and I've never heard that name before. Is that a name that you were given by birth, or did you take it on later?
Oh yeah, no, it was from my teacher.
I
It's
see.
Sanskrit. Oh, there's the dogs. Do you hear them?
Yes. Ah, there they are. And so, which teacher was that gave you that name?
Swami Satchidananda.
And he gave it to you directly.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, this is pretty cool.
Very
Do you know him?
cool.
Do you know Swami Satchidananda?
I have not met him personally, but I certainly know of him.
Yeah. Well, he's dead now.
I know. Well, his teachings certainly live on. And I've spoken to a couple people you know. Beth Donnelly Caban was on just recently. And also had a big, long talk with Rudra, which will go out before this one, I think. And that was a great talk. We kind of hit it off. And I told you I was going to try to do like a short one with him and then a short one with you and put them together. But we kind of had so much fun. It turned into
he doesn't stop talking.
Well, I know he goes, but it was fun. It was fun. And we got to really hear from his perspective some in terms of like not being in a wheelchair and then being in a wheelchair and sort of the process he went through even at Integral, you know.
Yeah.
And then he talked about you in the conference quite a bit. So it's great that we're getting a chance to talk as well.
Yeah, great.
And,
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. And I've listened to like a couple of interviews that you've done. You did like one or two interviews like a couple months back for the conference. And in both of those interviews, you mentioned your grandma and how she was like the first like kind of exposure you had to yoga when you were really young. Like your grandma was doing like yoga in front of you, like you got to see her doing yoga. And I'm intrigued by that. Like your like I don't know how old you are, but I think we're of similar age.
I'll be 50 in like a month and a half.
Oh, you got
crazy.
You see, you've got a few years on me. I'm 44, but
you're young.
Yeah, see, you've got some time on me. But then I'm thinking about my grandmas, like, and you I don't know. It seems like someone of your age to have a grandma who is into yoga is somewhat rare.
Yeah.
So tell me something about your grandma. How was your grandma into yoga at a time when it seemed like nobody else was into yoga?
You know, she was kind of a hippie, like when it wasn't fashionable. She was just beyond her, she was from a different time, you know.
Yeah.
She actually was always a seeker, you know, always looking for answers, and just was never happy with anything that she found. You know, she's always looking, and she was living in LA, and I think that's why there was some yoga happening around here.
Yeah, here or there in LA, right?
Yeah, in LA. Yeah. Well, I'm in Santa Barbara, but it's pretty nearby. And actually, she used to come to Santa Barbara, and Swami Satchidananda would lead annual New Year's retreats here in Santa Barbara, and she would always participate.
I see. Well, you know, cool. I know the area. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley.
Oh, right.
And then my brother went to school in Santa Barbara. So I spent a little time like partying in Isla Vista. And he had this like total crash pad apartment that was called The Pit. Wow. It actually had that spray painted on the outside of it. And I went like a couple of times. It was a pretty crazy scene. There was like a couple of times a year where that like one like square mile was like crazy.
Yeah.
But I know that part of California is quite beautiful up there.
Yeah,
I've always liked it a little bit more than Los Angeles. I thought if I'd ever go back there, I'd probably head up that way, you know.
Oh, yeah. Santa Barbara is incredible. It's just such a beautiful spot. It's kind of isolated and, you know, it's right on the beach and mountains. I mean, it's really special. My husband works at UCSB, and that's why he went to college there, too, and he
that's the first place I ever had pizza with wheat crust. I was like, wow, you know, I remember thinking that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, it's still pretty hippie. A lot of yoga though. A lot of yoga here.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that kind of struck me some is that I always like to ask people like when they come to yoga, and I've heard you talk about coming to it kind of around 1995 during the AIDS crisis.
Yeah. Well, it was in 1990 that I moved to San Francisco. I went to college in Ohio, and then after I found San Francisco because I was just tired of the cold, basically. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to find a strong gay community, and San Francisco was. And And I found yoga pretty soon after. So I was starting to practice on my own around 1990, but then I finished my first real teacher training in 95. And that was when my friend Kurt died. Yeah, he died of AIDS. And I had spent those years, late 80s and even in college, and then after working a lot with ACT UP, which is an AIDS activist organization. Do you know them? Do you know ACT
Yeah,
UP?
I remember from back then they had like these buttons, and
Yeah.
I remember from back at the time, yeah.
And you were living in LA?
Well, I was in LA, and then I moved to New York in 1990. But then I spent about 6-7 months in San Francisco living in Bernal Heights.
Oh, wow.
From the end of 94 right into the beginning of 95, actually.
Oh, okay.
And then
Cool.
I moved back to New York, sort of like as soon as I could. But, I had
Were
a
you doing yoga there, though, in San Francisco?
Not really. No, that was
okay.
before I got into yoga. At that time, I was doing like this crazy kind of postmodern dance stuff. There was like this performance space. It was called 848 Divisadero.
Yeah.
And it was like a space, and we rented out and we put on a show, me and my friend. I had 2 jobs. What were they? Oh, I worked at Haight Ashbury T-shirts.
Oh.
Folding T-shirts on the corner of Haight Ashbury. It was one of the coolest jobs I ever had. We were allowed to smoke pot in the back room. That's the only job I ever had. That the owner, you have to light incense, and then you could go take smoke. But I had I did really weird though, because I would talk it up with the tourists, and they'd buy more T-shirts. He liked me a lot. And then the other job that I had was Leather Tongue Video on 18th in Valencia.
Yeah.
And I worked there for a little while, and she was a cool lady, the woman who ran that place. And she wanted to make me manager because I was the only one who had the money right on the cash register at the end of the day. But that was a cool, kind of Kim's Video place. Anybody from New York,
Yeah.
But
That's funny.
I had a brief time there. And so that time, again, that's when there was a lot going on in the gay community.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in there, but I wasn't involved at all, but I certainly kind of was aware of it.
Well, it was a really insane time because there was just so much illness and death. It was just so weird because it seemed like, I had just come out, and I was so excited to be out and, kind of partying and meeting people. And at the same time, there was this crazy, disaster happening all around me. It was just such a bizarre combination. It was almost like people were really more open and feeling more like we had more civil rights as gay people all of a sudden. The shift had happened. And then all of a sudden AIDS happened and kind of was like this, having the rug pulled out from underneath the whole gay community. And it was crazy. I think now looking back, I realized that it was, in a way, there was a good part to it, which is that I was exposed to illness and death at a young age. And I'm lucky that I survived, but, it's not, at the time, it was horrifying and painful. But, to be thinking about and dealing with illness and death so young is kind of unusual. I think that's what kind of pushed me along my path spiritually, is just what's happening? People were, literally dying around me, and you had to really think about life differently than most, 21-year-olds think about.
Yeah, I know what you mean. My mom passed when I was 16, and it really I didn't really deal with that until I was 22, I'd say. 21, 22. And so even that experience of having to reconcile death is not the same. I didn't have to see her suffer, but at the same time, it certainly changed my perspective because, I've often said in the past, when you don't stress about the same kind of things when mom's in the hospital.
Yeah.
It's like you come to sort of cherish things differently. And I think it's interesting to me looking at other family members and stuff, how it can kind of go either way. You either stop caring or you care more. And there's sort of finding your way between those things. And Well,
I think it's, now that I've studied and practiced longer, I mean, I think it's actually a great blessing to face death young, because it keeps you awake to the reality. I mean, I often joke, when I'm leading my programs, I always say, like, I hate to remind you all, but, you're going to die. I just like to remind people that we're going to die, because we literally will just forget. We just pretend that we're, the ego doesn't want to die, so we act like it's not coming. And it's a crazy way to live, pretending like it's never going to end. And, at least the ego. So, it's a great gift in a way. Isn't that what happened to the Buddha? Like, he realized when he left, that's the story of Siddhartha, that he left the castle and the first thing he saw was a sick person and an old person and then a dead body or something. Like that was what made him have realization, was the realization that the body gets sick and dies.
Well, I understand that. I mean, in my own experience, I've come to think of my mom's death as a blessing. And I think sometimes that's hard for people to get their mind around. But I see it like you said. I don't think I'd be thinking the way that I think or living the way that I live had that not happened. And I'm grateful for that in a strange way.
Yeah. It's an amazing, I mean, I don't know, about your spiritual path, but generally people that are really committed to yoga and to spiritual practice have had some kind of experience like that. Something either very painful, or either a brush with death or disability or illness themselves that forces them to, wake up a little bit and think, wow, there's got to be something more.
Yeah.
Because if everything is going fine, then you accept that, I just need to make money and have a nice house and have a right partner and all those things in the world. You think those will be enough, but when those things start taken away from you, then you start to think, wait, there's got to be something else.
Yeah, and a lot of times, and it's been talked about on this podcast a lot, that when someone hits that point in their life, yoga becomes the sort of vehicle to find your way through it.
Yeah.
And I know that was true for me, and it seems like that was true for you too, right?
Oh, totally. I mean, yoga saved me for sure. I mean, it was such a devastating time, and yoga was just like, thank God I was practicing already. I mean, it was just right there for me, and that's why when I finished my first yoga training in 1995. Well, kind of. I can tell you that's kind of a long story, but basically around 1995, I finished when Kurt was dying, and it was so clear that I could share these great practices with people who are, really struggling with HIV and AIDS too. So that's what I started to do. I just saw that's what I felt, and it was so clear to me that yoga is perfect for anyone who's having any kind of challenge. And of course we all are, but anyone who's consciously facing one, it's so amazing.
Well, also I feel like it's a natural thing when you receive benefit from yoga practices to want to share that with other people.
Yeah.
And then especially when you see people who are in what you identify as your community, struggling and having trouble, it's just rewarding and helpful for you probably. I know like the things that I do with other people are like the things I need to do to feel okay.
Yeah.
And so that we do that together is a very rewarding exchange.
Yeah, I mean, that's, they say, well, my teacher, Swami Satchidananda, he always says that the most important thing in yoga practice is community, or sangha. And I think he says one of the most important things, but to me it seems like the most important thing, and that's what you're saying in another way, that we want to share with our community, but also we share with our community because we want to keep it in our lives. Like we want to keep it present. So like I just started to do more yoga, teach more yoga because I loved yoga. And it just felt like a natural progression to then want to share it with people, partially because I felt like, oh, this is an amazing thing that I want you all to experience, but also because I just wanted to do more of it. I just wanted to, I needed that, definitely.
Yeah, and
I definitely needed it.
Was it always integral yoga, or did you do other kind of yoga first?
No, it was always integral yoga. I mean, that was the thing I was going to say. Is it was funny that my grandmother had studied integral yoga, and I had really practiced with her when I was very young. And then when I moved to San Francisco in around 1990, 1991, I kind of just stumbled into an integral yoga class with a teacher named Kazuko Onodera, who actually, that's why I was saying it's kind of a long story. She wanted to train me. She's Japanese, and she kind of took me in as her apprentice. And I have to say that she's really the person I learned so much from. You know, I was so lucky to I had about 4 or 5 years working with her.
And which I'm sorry, I don't think, where was that? Where did you work with her?
That was in Berkeley. She was actually in Berkeley.
Okay, so I'm confused now. So when were you in Berkeley?
Well, I was in San Francisco, but I would go to Berkeley to practice with her.
They're just like a jump from each other.
They're next door. Yeah, it's like Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Berkeley's like Brooklyn to New York.
Gotcha. All right. So what were those first? What were your first like kind of formal classes? Not watching grandma.
Yeah, it was with her. So it was with this woman Kazuko, who was just brilliant, and she was Japanese, and she had a very Japanese lifestyle, and that was the way she wanted to teach me and train me. Because I immediately loved practicing with her. She had group classes, small groups. She had a studio in her home, and I just would go to her as much as I could, and then she kind of took me under her wing, and I became like her apprentice.
And how did you find out about her?
4 years. I went to her for a massage. I was having health issues myself. Like I was so stressed. I was having digestive problems. I just couldn't sleep. I think just because of all the people that were sick and dying around me, it was just like too much for me. And so she really helped me out. You know, she was taking care of me, and she was kind of showing me. Actually, what she did is show me how to take care of myself. A lot of the time we spent together was actually cooking, and she basically taught me how to cook really healthy vegetarian food and how to take care of myself.
That's amazing. That's like some true yoga right there. Just teach you how to make food.
It was beautiful. And, she was, and I keep saying she's Japanese, because she would do the Japanese tea ceremony. And so she did everything in a very conscious way, and very meditative way. And so cooking with her was like that. It was fun, but very serious, very precise and organized, and that's how she basically. It's almost that she kind of just trained me how to be, in my body, how to take care of myself, and how to do yoga. And it all came from yoga for her. She was very devoted to Swami Satchidananda, integral yoga. But that's where I started, and then. And I was impatient. After 4 years with her, I was like, I want to teach, I'm ready to go teach. And she was still thinking, no, you can keep training. And then I saw that Integral Yoga in San Francisco had a 12-week teacher training. So I was like, I'm going to go there, So I kind of...
I know how to make food. Now I'm going to go do the teacher training.
I was young and silly, and I just wanted to get...
No, I totally understand. I did the same kind of thing, So you went to go do teacher training in San Francisco, and that's like, isn't that like the mother center kind of? Like, did the San Francisco come first or the New York come first?
Actually, New York was first, but almost within a year of each other. Then San Francisco. San Francisco was founded in 1970. And then later he founded Yogaville, which is in Virginia, the big ashram there, which is now kind of the main ashram of integral yoga.
And when you do teacher training at San Francisco Center, that means like you go into the ashram. Like I talked with Rudra about that. Like that means you go into ashram life, right?
Well, no, actually, that's how we do it in Virginia. You actually go and live there. But in San Francisco, it's an urban ashram, which is basically just like I don't know how to explain it. It's an urban yoga center. It's a big Victorian, and there's actually 10 residents who live there. And then we have regular classes for people who just come from outside, and same with teacher training. People just come from outside for 3 days a week and take class and leave. So that's what I did. I never lived there actually. I would always.
Rudra talked about when he went there. Oh, I guess it wasn't that you did teacher training there. That when you lived there, you have to like do the morning stuff. That's what he was saying.
Oh yeah, when you live there, you have very serious requirements for your sadhana for your practice. And they do 3 meditations a day. You don't have to do all of them, but that's what they do is 3 meditations a day and yoga class. Right. And you have to live a yoga lifestyle to live there. And because
You've never lived there before?
No, I never lived there because I had my husband, Matt, we were already together back then. I mean, so
is he into yoga too?
No, not really. He saved me from becoming a Swami.
But you know what? That's so funny because I was just at lunch today with someone, and they were asking about my wife and if she was into yoga, and I was like, well, she practices, but not really. You know what I mean? Like, she doesn't even listen to this podcast. You know what I mean? She just like do your dishes. You know, like she. And I need that in my life. You know, it's like the best thing. So I totally get it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it totally keeps me grounded, and because otherwise I would just I don't know what I would do. I would probably float away.
Too much meditation. Well, in any case, so all right, so you do the teacher training, and then it seems like you're gung-ho, and after the teacher training, do you just immediately start to go in and teach in the AIDS community, or do you teach in regular classes? Like, what's your first teaching experiences like?
Both. I mean, I started teaching regular classes, and I also started teaching yoga for people with HIV/AIDS right away. And I was insecure about it, but I just wanted to get started. So we started a class there at the Institute in San Francisco, and then pretty soon after, I started one at the local hospital, which was the Davies campus of California Pacific Medical Center, which is in the Castro in San Francisco, and I taught there for over 12 years. They have a great program, and so it was an outpatient program, but we had a really strong community there, and then I would start inviting other people with different disabilities too, so it kind of expanded.
I see. And is that the sort of petri dish that becomes the Accessible Yoga Conferences?
Yeah, kind of, because what happened was many of those students stayed with me for years. And I also worked for a few I worked for Dean Ornish. You know Dean Ornish?
I sure do. He's done some pretty revolutionary studies. And what kind of work did you do with him?
Well, so I taught yoga for him, not during the initial study. He did an initial study now that's probably, 20 years ago. He did a lifestyle heart trial, which basically, the name something like that. It basically showed that you could use yoga lifestyle to reverse heart disease.
Beth talked about that, actually. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was on the
pretty
cover
amazing.
Of Newsweek magazine and everything. Yeah. I mean, he was brilliant, and I mean, he is still. He basically showed how you could apply this lifestyle and these practices in a medical setting. It was kind of the beginning of yoga therapy, I would say.
And so, what role did you play there? What were you doing with the program?
So I was teaching yoga. I was just teaching yoga to his patients, and I worked at his. He had retreats, and then he had a clinic at UCSF.
And when you did that, did you have like set protocols that you had to follow, or were you just allowed to teach like you would normally teach, or was there?
Yeah, well, it was Dean Ornish was an integral yoga person too, so he was trained. He was trained by Swami Satchidananda. So
guys were on the same page already.
Yeah,
right?
So he wanted integral yoga in the beginning, and now it's changed and opened up. But that was how we started, and it was just a very basic hatha yoga, gentle hatha yoga class, with no chanting, no Sanskrit, just very. Very straightforward practice, but with a lot of meditation. And it was beautiful. I mean, it was inspiring just to see the people who had really taken it on and how they changed their life. Because a lot of people that would go to him were desperate because they couldn't get any more treatments from Western medicine. I often say that you can only get open heart surgery twice. Not that you want it more.
Yeah.
But then you have to do something else. There was nothing else for people to do, so they would come to him. And the thing I'll say about Dean Ornish is that people really focused on his dietary protocol, which was a very extremely low-fat diet. But really, he showed that he analyzed his research later, and the parts of the program that were actually most effective were the yoga and meditation, which he called stress management, and the group support, which is basically these groups that he would run that were beautiful, like really positive community building support groups. So though it wasn't the diet necessarily, that was important, but it was mostly yoga and meditation and community. That was the key for people to get better.
Interesting. I I remember reading a bunch about him, and one of the big takeaways I got from him too, which I've always kept with me, was how like small changes that are kept consistent can have a big impact later. Mm-hmm. And I've always thought that, small adjustments here or there, like you're turning a ship, like just a little turn of the wheel, the back end swings around later.
That's great.
And I've always really appreciated that about the work that he was doing in terms of like how the effects of yoga reverse things, Yeah. Yeah. Well, that must have been a pretty amazing experience to see that firsthand, the way that yoga practices could address situations that Western medicine were left wanting.
Right, and I saw that happening with my friends who had HIV and AIDS and students with HIV and AIDS, and so I immediately started to do what he was doing. I was kind of copying what I learned from him and tried to bring that into my classes. So we had longer classes with a discussion because I saw the importance of community. And so we would do like 2-hour classes. We'd usually have like a half-hour discussion where I'd bring up some, like we'd read the Yoga Sutras or the Bhagavad Gita or anything, or just chat, and basically try to build community amongst the students. And that really was beautiful to see how they bonded and supported each other over the years. I mean, I remember one of the students was actually in the hospital we were at. One of the students got sick and was staying in the hospital just upstairs from where we had class. So that week we went up, and during our class we went and sat around his bed. And he actually died within a few days after that. But it was just a beautiful experience to be able to have the students there in his hospital room, just talking and hang out with him. It was really amazing. It showed me the power of community. People just want that. We want those extended families, and we need it. And Dean studied that beautifully. He has a later book called Love and Survival that I always recommend to people, which really looks at the importance of community networks and intimacy and love in our lives, which is what you can find through yoga, I think, if you practice in the right way.
Well, that's a fair point. That's a fair point that you're making, and I think we could get to that point. But before we get to that point, I feel like I want to know how. If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.